really good team, dangerous in a lot of ways.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in Maize and Blue Review. Good afternoon, Michigan football. I'm Dennis Fithian, and it's great to be here with you on this Tuesday. Michigan State week. You know that by now. You're ready for the game. Great weather outside. It's taken us, right to the middle of the week having this nice weather here. If it was, cold, we'd be sitting inside, just counting the days and minutes and everything else, to Saturday night. And it gets to be one of those things, you wake up, you're a college football fan, you wake up early on a Saturday morning, way early, like it's, Christmas and your birthday. At least that's the way it works for me on Saturdays in the fall, especially Michigan football Saturdays in the fall. And then you're like, all right, it's pretty, when you get used to these 12 o'clock games, man, you get up, you get everything going and try to get everything out of the way. So you're in place and ready to go at 12 o'clock. And that's if you're watching a game at home. If you're heading down to tailgate and everything, you can even get going a little bit earlier. But we got the whole day on Saturday. And if you've been through a Michigan football night game, and, we used to talk about it all the time, like, what would it be like, because you'd always turn on the TV and you see these SEC teams and it'd be night and, lights and everything. You'd be like, oh, man, that's football. And, that's going to be football for Michigan coming up on Saturday in the Backyard Brawl against Michigan State. It's always good to be here talking with you. If you're out there and you want to get your thoughts in, you go ahead and, answer the question, like what you think of Michigan State head coach Mel Tucker, and we'll put your thoughts up on the screen, like Antoine, the first one to jump on in and say, hey, he thinks Tuck is out of luck. Time to serve time at the big house. The boys in blue are looking for them this year, and he's got the go blue. That's it. It's good to see Jason, hoping that everybody is doing well, and let's get this going. Go blue. And Trepa, Michigan has never beat Tuck. Tuck coming. Facts. Yeah, well, that's true. They have not been able to solve Mel Tucker, and that's the thing. That's why, as I sit here and, you have some fun and, people make fun of Mel Tucker and how much Michigan State had to pay for him. And, Michigan had a big hand in that, losing twice to him. I don't have any real insults for Mel Tucker myself. We are going to look at, I've got some stuff to say about him, and I'll get to that a little bit more. I'll just tell you what we are discussing. There's been some interesting things when it comes down to gambling and betting. You may do it in your office. You bet about, you'll wear a hat or a shirt or a jersey from the opponent. You change your avatar and something on Facebook, all kinds of different bets. We'll talk about some of those strange bets coming up this hour. There's also something that jumped out in top 25 voting this week that I'm going to get to. We're going to start out talking about Michigan State's season and just how they've been doing under Mel Tucker in this third year. And, his first year, that was the pandemic season. I go back and think about it. Michigan State wasn't supposed to win any games. And there's a lot of people that just completely dismiss the pandemic. And I understand that, especially for Michigan football. And it was a weird year. It was weird for a lot of teams. There were a lot of teams. There was no home field advantage. It's trying to talk about, how people deal with the pandemic. It was the weird time, weird for sports. And so a lot of people just take it, just throw it. It doesn't mean nothing, Meanwhile, they played the games and they didn't put the score up there. So it meant that, and what I've thought about it differently, if the basketball team would have laid a complete egg and, played terribly, said after the way they played the year before, or so, you think, the pandemic, it didn't mean anything. But, the basketball team went and they won a championship. And, that was the most entertaining Michigan team in my life. I love the pandemic Michigan basketball team. They were awesome, and they won the Big Ten, and it was very entertaining. So it meant something, I understand that they had to deal with a lot of, we all did, And they did too, playing. So I don't dismiss it. So I go back to Tucker in the first game. State had no expectations. Tucker comes in. He doesn't know his team. He can't even coach his team. He's got to deal with his entire team basically on the computer, and chatting with them on like that and coaching them like that. Those are some crazy things. Zooming with your players for practice, and he turned over the roster so much that nobody expected him to do anything. And then the first game was one of the most embarrassing football games that I've ever watched from a team. State, they couldn't get out of their own way. They looked like a team that nobody knew anybody, and they were just put out there and slapped their jerseys on. They've turned it over, I don't know, half dozen times. It was Rutgers. Michigan State had them, and they looked so bad. But then, that was only game one. In game two, and they came to Ann Arbor and they won that game. So, Tucker, I give him credit for that. Like, it couldn't have looked any worse. I don't think that they were like throwing the game to get Michigan off, and it worked for the fans and it worked for me. Like they looked so bad against Rutgers, and Michigan looked. I say they looked the greatest ever against Minnesota, but they looked good. They went on the road. Minnesota was supposed to be pretty good, and Michigan went out there and they handled Minnesota pretty good. So I thought that Michigan would just kill Michigan State in 2020, and they didn't. They lost that game. It was very disappointing. And then last year, I thought that last year's game was a great game. It was a very entertaining game. Now, it's hard to say that it's a great game and very memorable game and an awesome game when the team that you're rooting for loses. I understand that. But I just recall at one point, was it 30-30? I think, it's in the third quarter somewhere. And the game, had all the twists and turns and the calls and the big plays and all this. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, regardless of what happens, this is a great game. That's what I said it at that point. And I wasn't going to go back. Well, Michigan lost the game and it didn't seem like it was all that great. But it really was a great game. So now we get to this point here in Michigan State this season. So I was impressed. And then, Tucker, he got his contract. He got a contract because he went out there and the team played really well. I mean, they had the best turnaround, and for some reason, Wake Forest wasn't able to hand the ball off to, K9 the way that Michigan State did. I still never, figured that out. I didn't hear much about Kenneth Walker III when he was at Wake Forest, but sure heard about him a lot, like from the first play that he ever played with Michigan State, like against Northwestern. He had a ball off, boom, guy's off. It's like, wait a second, what's going on here? This guy's great. So he was great, and Michigan fans will chalk up Mel Tucker's success to one player. It'd be like, well, if he didn't have K9, well, sure, you can do that for a lot of teams. Like critics of Michigan like to do that. And critics of Lloyd Carr back in the day always said that about Carr. That wasn't Carr's championship team. That was Woodson's team. If he didn't have Woodson, well, yeah. If Michigan didn't have Woodson in '97, they would not have won the championship. So I'm going a long way here to talk about Tucker, and I was impressed the first 2 years of the way he was able to put together a team. Like it's one thing he could do, like all the different transfers, and he put him out there, and then they played so well last year. So, he gets a lot of credit for that. I can understand why Michigan State, they look like they got the real McCoy, so they had to pay the piper when it came down to that. So it's understandable. But then this year happened. And then this year, I feel, that I'm not a Michigan State fan, clearly. I feel like, it was a huge letdown. So it wasn't a lot to take out of I was there on that first Friday party watching Michigan State against Western, and it wasn't like they were overly impressive there. I didn't watch the Akron game, but I did watch Michigan State in the night game go out to Washington. And that game, State was terrible in that game. If you looked at the score, you say, 39-28, that wasn't all that bad. It was all that bad. State never had a chance in that game. They're down 39-14. Penix could have thrown for 500 yards if he wanted to. They took their foot off the gas finally in the fourth quarter, but 397 and 4 touchdowns for Penix and the Michigan State pass defense. Like, if they would have fired their defensive coordinator after that game, I don't think anybody would have said, "Oh, that's too soon." No, he looked like he deserved to get fired after that game. But that wasn't their worst game. It was the next game against Minnesota, and I took that game in almost in its entirety. And the Gophers went up to East Lansing and they slaughtered Michigan State on their home field. They're up 34-0. State could do nothing. They look like the worst football team in the country. They ended up avoiding the shutout in the last couple seconds. The Gophers weren't able to put the bagel up there, and State was able to finally their backup quarterback threw to some guy I'd never heard of with a couple seconds to go, and they avoid the shutout. So it was only 34-7. But that was one of the worst games. Like when you see, teams that look like the coaches lost them, and they want to fire the coach, and nobody, the fans completely empty the stadium. That's what went on back on just September the 24th. So a month ago today, the Spartan fans completely emptied the stadium. One of the most embarrassing performances ever, for the Spartans. And, they get killed by Minnesota. Now, they go to Maryland and they lose 27-13. This is where I feel a little bit biased about the Michigan State, because I did not watch the first half of that game. And I watched the whole second half of Michigan State at Maryland. And Michigan State didn't score. They put their 13 points up in the first half. It was a close game at the half. Maryland kicked some field goals in the second half, but they shut MSU down. And after the two previous performances of watching, the Huskies and the Gophers just smack Mel Tucker's squad around, I watched the second half, and I wasn't very impressed. I'm like, this Michigan State team stinks. And then Ohio State killed Michigan State. It was, 49-13. That game at one point, when I turned it off, it was 49-13. State, got a late score there in the fourth quarter. But Ohio State, Stroud threw 6 touchdowns, and Ohio State in the third quarter just said, all right, let's just back it up. We've put up 49 points. Let's empty the benches. This is the easiest game ever. Let's just get out of here with the 49-point win. And, that's what they did. You had one of the writers for Michigan State over there saying, well, Michigan State, left with their dignity in that game. Really? I didn't feel that way. I don't know how that was a surprising opinion by somebody that follows and covers Michigan State, that the Spartans were able to hang on to their dignity, but because they didn't give up 60 or 70, because State could have, because Ohio State decided not to score 60 or 70 on them. So Michigan State was able to get away with their dignity in that game, according to one of their prize writers. I don't know. So, so then a 4-game slide, and it looks really bad. People even talking about, Tucker, like this is, he's become, you go all the way through it. All these coaches, Jimbo Fisher, all these guys that have just been complete. They gave him, gigantic contracts. And there's a few of them that all of them are looking at it like, wow, they're owed 70, 80, $90 million, and, they can't do anything. They're stuck with them. And, Michigan State fans are feeling a lot like that. And then they got their win last week against Whiskey, one of the most disappointing teams in the country. Now, Wisconsin went on and got after the coaching change, they got a win against Purdue. So I don't know if that's a signature win for Jim Leonhard, but they have rebounded a little bit, and State did do some good things against Wisconsin. They also, late in that game, that was a tough one. Even though I recorded it, Tennessee and Alabama were playing, so I'm going back and forth, and these games there was a lot of reviews, and that Michigan State-Wisconsin game was taking forever, so I'm flipping back and forth, and the Alabama-Tennessee game, it's just incredible drama at the game of the year to this point right now. But then I'd go back and watch Michigan State, and late in that game, Michigan State they move into Wisconsin territory, and they're going to be able to kick a field goal at the end. They get a chance to kick a field goal and win it in regulation, and then they call like the worst. Like you can say, well, what would be the worst thing? Turning it over would be the worst thing, but what's the worst play call? Well, it would be they had no timeouts. It would be not getting out of bounds if you were going to run a play. Like if you want to run a play, it had to be like a 5 or 10 yard out, or you take a shot to the end zone. Get rid of it. There's no way that you can call a play where you're going to get tackled, because then you're going to have to go running everybody on there really quick and try to get the field goal. And there wasn't a whole lot of time to go. So State throws this little 5-yard pass, little, I don't know, it was a little smoke screen. And, sure enough, the guy gets tackled. And they got to run everybody out there like the Keystone Cops and everything. And the guy's snapping the ball. And of course he misses it, because you have to have enough time to get that whole operation and get the whole thing out there. And it was just a complete botched play call and execution and everything else. But then they had a double pass in the end zone, and they get a turnover against Wisconsin. So they come up with a win. So they're feeling, I don't want to say pretty good about themselves. They feel, they snapped their losing streak, at least, heading into a bye. If he lost that, it was going to be more like, wow, Mel Tucker for how many more years of this, to go through. So, that's where we sit as we watch them. And as much as I don't think, because of the rivalry, and I've seen how Michigan State plays in this particular rivalry, and I know how I just know how it goes. I thought the 23 points seemed like, way too many. I thought it would be a lot closer than that. Not like a, 2-point game or, biting your nails down to it. But, I thought Michigan was winning, but not by, that many. But, that's just an opinion. They might, mop the floor with them. It easily could happen. But that was just my opinion when I saw it. But having gone back last night and just looking over, I'm going to come out here and I'm going to talk about Mel Tucker, and I'm going to talk about Michigan State and just how they've done this year. I've watched, most of their games, and there's just going back, man. These teams have been slapping. Those teams, they just smacked Michigan State upside the head. I mean, Michigan State never had a chance in that game. Ohio State could have scored 100 if they wanted to. And the State was lucky to get a touchdown against Minnesota. And again, in one of those pathetic performances, and this is like me being objective. Maybe I don't have to call it pathetic. And just one of the very poor performances that you'll ever see from a football team at home, getting popped like they did. Let's get some of the feedback up here and see where you're sitting with Mel Tucker and Michigan State this year. There's something that we're going to get to next. I'm putting you I put it up on the screen. If you're listening on a podcast, you don't have any idea what I'm talking about. Let's see what the folks have to say at all. And they might not be talking specifically about Mel Tucker, but let's just see. Zach says, last year we brought in a whole bunch of talented DBs, Barry, Sabb, and Jones. Any word on those guys? Well, you've seen them a little bit, but those guys are all the ones that you're mentioning. Zeke Berry, Keon Sabb, and Jones, Kobe Jones. Yeah, those guys are all going to redshirt. So, yeah, I've heard some good things about. They could not stop talking about. I thought Keon Sabb could have played linebacker, could have played safety. I thought that, he was going to be in the mix this year, that he was just that kind of talent. But in fall camp, Steve Klinkscale and Jim Harbaugh, the times that they talked about the freshman, they talked about Zeke Berry like he was going to play, and that, heck, it wouldn't have been the craziest thing maybe if he'd have been out there and stole one of the spots, and, he was a starting safety. Or, I mean, that's how well he played. And for Kobe Jones, he looked like he was pretty good, ready to go too. I forget whether it was Miles Pollard or Kobe Jones. I want to say it was Kobe Jones in the spring game down there on I think it was a 4th and 1 in whatever team the Maize or the Blue was going for it. And it was Will Johnson, and it was another freshman corner. So it was either Kobe Jones or, like I said, Miles Pollard. And those guys, the way that they played it, they look like pros. Just great technique, the way they turned, they located the ball, the hips, just all of it, without knowing all the finer techniques and everything else, like, some coach or some former DB like that played in college. It just looked very good, looked very big time. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's no reason to be down on any of those guys. It looks like, in fact, the other way. It's all good news about those guys. Steven says Tuck has gotten the best of us, but he sucks. He's not going to last long at MSU, but he will get paid for his failure. Well, they did suck. They have sucked this year. So I'm with you on that. But does he suck? Because last year they didn't suck. Actually, they were really good. He did a really good job with Michigan State. And, it's not just that he's gotten the best of Michigan. I mean, that's, big on his resume for sure. But last year, the first year they just got the win against Michigan, and they pretty much did. They were expected to be pretty bad, and they were, the rest of the season there. But he got the win against Michigan, so it made it, in his first year there, all the things considered. But then last year he got the win, but he followed it up. It's not like, he just got the win and then, it was just 500 or something. They had double-digit wins, 11 wins, I think. They won the bowl game, too. I know, Kenny Pickett wasn't there for Pitt, everything else. K9 wasn't there for the Spartans, but it was an impressive year. So I don't know. The only adjustment that I would make there is that his team sucks this year, but that doesn't mean that he sucks. If you want to say he sucks this year, I would buy that. I got a little bit of a cough, so every time I go back here, I hit the cough button. Okay, let's get a couple more feedbacks on Michigan State and Michigan, wherever you're at with it. Matt says he thinks we're going to win by 28, but he doesn't want to take a chance on that line. I understand that. Hey, Michigan could. It was just a couple years ago that Michigan, it was the year before Tucker came in. And they, were sending D'Antonio to the showers that they blew him out. AJ saying that Tuck got lucky. He accidentally found a great player. So, that's I understand that from a fan standpoint, but I don't think you really mean that, AJ. If you're going to get lucky, getting lucky accidentally finding a player, that's not really how it works. I mean, you go out there and you do everything you can. I would revise that statement and say that Tuck found a great player. So I would not say lucky or accidentally in there, but I know that kind of makes me sound like, well, what are you, on, MSU's payroll or something like that. No, I just, I'm kind of calling it like I see it. You guys are as well. Jason loves that the biggest game for MSU is us. He loves that they had rings made with the score of our game on it. It's like a stalker or ex-girlfriend that won't let go and focus on her better half or herself. LOL. Yeah, I forgot that they put the old score of the Michigan game on the side of the ring. Yeah, it's a weird thing about this, and this is what makes rivalries. For me, growing up, Michigan State was never on TV. I'm 52, so back in the day, not every game was on TV, and Michigan State was on probation in the 70s, and I think in the 80s they might have been on probation. I don't remember anything about Michigan State until I was a senior in high school. They won the Big Ten. They had this Bobby McAllister, and I was like, whoa, they can win the Michigan State. And then I was like, oh, that's not any fun, because up until that point, I was aware of Michigan State basketball, but not really at all about football. And I remember, Bad Moon Rising, Andre Rison, I remember him making a great catch in the bowl game. I was like, oh, that's the first time I've ever actually seen Michigan State. And then as it went on, and I started, hanging around with more Michigan folks, and they started talking about Michigan State, and they would talk about this rivalry. Most Michigan fans that I would run into, they would say, who's Michigan's biggest rival? And I'd say, Ohio State. They're like, correct. Who's Michigan's second biggest rival? And I'd say, Michigan State. No. It was always for Michigan, all for a longest time, until D'Antonio came there, almost every Michigan fan you would run into would say, here's Michigan's biggest rivals: Ohio State, Notre Dame, then Michigan State. It was always, and it was one of those things where you'd really push them into the background. It was meant to disrespect them. It was meant, but then because Michigan State, their biggest rival in football is Michigan. And there's no doubt about that. And so you'd say, well, Michigan is your biggest rival, and yet Michigan's, you're down the line. And State fans hated that. And it was true for the longest time. You hate it when people blast you, when your rivals blast you for something, and it's true. That's when you hate it. Like, so, and for decades, it was like that, and it just burned Michigan State fans up. It really was a sore spot from them. Now, in recent years, with Notre Dame being off the schedule, obviously, and with what D'Antonio was able to do, that brought Michigan State way up there, easily number 2. And then there was the case made because Michigan was struggling so much with Ohio State, and Ohio State was a national player, and Michigan just couldn't get over that hump. That actually State had jumped in front of Ohio State. I never quite felt like that. Maybe I just couldn't bring myself to, like you could say, you just didn't want to admit reality. You could say that. But I never quite thought, even when State was doing their best, a few years ago when they had D'Antonio, doing all their things and, beating Michigan a lot, I still never thought that they were the number 1 rival. And that's just how I looked at it. Okay, let's get a couple more in here. Tuck's going to go trick-or-treating in Ann Arbor this year. We're going to give him a Snickers bar or a toothbrush. Yeah, Michigan State's going to come in masquerading as a rival of Michigan, and they're going to be unmasked and shown that they're a really, terrible football team. That's the hope. I think I could probably say that a little bit stronger. State's going to come in masquerading as a top rival of Michigan, and they'll be unmasked for the little whimpering puppies that they are. We'll still put that in the workshop, see if I can get a little bit better than that. The captain weighing in on Mel Tucker. 52 zip over Akron. That's impressive. Can only play who's on their schedule, and they blew them out. Complete and utter domination. Never mind an opponent full of scholarship athletes. Oh, wait, they lost 4 straight after that. Never mind. Yeah, well, when you're going to the non-conference, I mean, and talking about rolling over teams like that, Jason says he doesn't believe Tuck will be around long. There is not a plethora of players in the transfer portal that are dying to go to East Lansing, and he's not doing well on the recruiting front out of state. Yeah, well, look at what did he get? 10 years. So he's going to be around. Like when you say, how did you phrase that? He's not going to be around long. I disagree with that. Yeah, I mean, this year's terrible. I mean, he could still have a terrible year next year. And a terrible, I think you'd get to 23. Like nobody's talking about, like, I think they're jokes. I think everybody understands. Nobody's, forking over, $90 million. Michigan could beat them 100-0 this Saturday. Nobody's stepping up. Even Ishbia, is just billionaire. I don't think he's going to be like, well, I gave the $95 million. Here's 95, and here's another 50 to go after somebody else. That's not happening. And even next year, if let's just say State is terrible next year, not that big of a reach. They're not that good of a football team. I don't think that they're going to be removing him next year. At that point, you're going to have to, give him $80 million. Are they going to give him about $70 million and buy him out if he went for this year bad, next year bad, and in 2024 bad? Is Ishbia going to write a $70 million check? And you can say, well, he's going to have to write a 50 or 60. Might as well just go ahead and cut a $70 million check. I don't think so. I don't think that Mel Tucker is going anywhere, even if this team bottoms out like they have this year. And I know there's a few more games. I can't see it even for 4 more years after this. But I know, you say things like that, and then football season from week to week, it's so painful, and you watch it. It just reminds me, because heading into, I'll just go to the pros for a second, and for the Lions, when, they were bringing their new regime in of Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, and they're like, look, this is going to be a process. It's not going to be a 1-year deal. I looked at it and said, they're taking the long view. I'm giving, Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, 2 years. They're going to probably tank this thing, and I'm not going to get all upset about them for 2 years. But in football, it's a lot easier said than done. Because last year there were a few times like, Dan Campbell looks like a clown. He doesn't know what he's doing on the sideline. And then this year, there's been a number of instances here. He's after the game like, that's my fault. Put this one on me. And it's like, wait a second. Why is this guy? Am I really, going to be 2 years in and then thinking about, why does it matter? Why keep him around? If you know. That's the point. But pros, it's a lot easier to bounce somebody out of there. Dan Campbell doesn't have a 10-year deal. Mel Tucker's got 9 more years after this year. Is that right? They signed him for 10 years. Or does he just have 7 after this? And so, you get him down after maybe another year or two, and you're only talking about giving him $40 million or something. This still sounds incredible. Whichever it is. That's what Todd's saying. He has to be given 4 or 5 years. I know. I agree with you. Once you coach MSU, you suck forever. Even Saban sucked some. Yeah, I mean, it was a fine argument until you started talking about Saban. Like, Saban had some, wasn't great the whole time. So I don't know what the argument was there. something about Saban. Saban wasn't even great. He wasn't great at Michigan State as well. Michigan wins by double digits and in turnover margin and time of possession. Well, turnover margin, that's a tough one to predict. Time of possession, the way Michigan can run the ball with lightning. I'll buy that. I think that they're definitely, it's not like they're not going to throw and not look for big plays in the passing game. I think absolutely they're going to do that. I think J.J. McCarthy's going to run. I think, he's going to throw and run. He's a dual threat quarterback. I think he's unleashed. I think he'll, have the freedom to do both of those. And I think he will, take off a number of times. Yeah, I don't know. And turnovers, sure. That'd be good. And, if they win the turnover margin and time of possession, then winning by double digits, that's not I'm not, Andres, I'm not saying that you're, going way out there on a limb or anything. That sounds about right. Like, Michigan's a 23-point favorite. And I was looking, we're a part of the Maize and Blue review. And I was looking on the posting board, and there was a poster. And admittedly, he's always got it out for Michigan State. He's always worried about Michigan State. He's always talking about Michigan State. And, he was worried about this line. Like, it's so big. And he's thinking Michigan's going to cover this line or he's going to be disappointed. And he said today that he would be disappointed if Michigan only won the game by 14 points. And I was thinking, really? Don't be disappointed if Michigan only wins the game by 14 points. And in fact, if I could sign up right now for a 14-point win, I'd sign up for it. Give it to me. Give me a 14-point win right now. I'll take it. Now, yeah, it's not covering the spread. Means that it was going to be closer than you probably wanted it to be. 14 points is still a handy victory in a rivalry game. Don't be disappointed. I'm not saying you. I'm saying this poster. All right, let's, speaking of posters and online kind of stuff, this jumped out to me last night. So there's this guy, I don't know who he is, Richard. He's a Michigan fan. But he says, I'm going to read the tweet in case you're listening on the podcast, but he says, I refuse to walk out of this game empty-handed. Either Michigan wins and I'm on cloud 9, or I'm furious and $2,000 richer. And he says, go blue. Now, why would he be $2,000 richer? Because he took a screenshot of his receipt of the bet that he put down on Michigan State. This is a Michigan fan. He put $155 on Michigan State to win outright on the money line. Plus 1,200. If you do that and State wins it outright, he's going to get $2,000. I went myself and looked, and it was minus 21.5. And if you put $10 down, you might not want to put 155. You might not want to do it at all. But if you even just went with $10, you could get 110. Now, is this something that is completely off the wall? I'm going to say no. It's you hang around enough sports fans and you see this a lot. This is not something that I would have considered. If you would have said something about this 5 years ago, I'd say, I'm not doing anything like that. This sounds ridiculous. But and then I'd say, I've never even heard of anybody. And even if I have heard of it, people don't really think like that. But then fans do think like that. And there's a lot of folks that now that, your gambling's legal, you hear it a lot. I've seen, Michigan fans this year do it. Like they just say, look, I'm going to bet the money line of the other team. And if Michigan's a big favorite, like, yeah, you'll pay $20 to have Michigan win. You don't care. You'll be on like this. I think this guy says it well here. He's going to be on cloud 9 on Saturday if Michigan wins. He's going to take that $155 and it's going to be the best $155 he's ever gambled. He is so ready to lose that bet. 155. That's way more than I bet to begin with. But, everybody's got their price, right? That, they think about like, all right, how much would I put down to see Michigan win this game? It might be $100, 50, whatever. 5. Like I put $10 out there and you'd say, I don't care about the $10. And if they lose, your consolation prize is $110. Whatever that consolation is. But there's more people out there that are like this Richard, who would think about putting money on Michigan State on the money line, being a Michigan fan, not rooting for Michigan State at all. In fact, being a complete and total Michigan fan, everything, with every ounce almost of what they have, except thinking about, hey, what if the worst thing ever happened? You score a big, bag of cash. It's something to think about. Now, as I have said a few times here, I'd stay away pretty much from college to begin with. I kind of like I don't know, it's weird because I know college isn't pure. There's a lot of things that are going on, but, for me, Saturdays, and, I'll like very small amounts to put on. So a game here or there, parlays or whatever, change. But the pros is a little bit different story, but when it comes to thinking about betting on Michigan, there's already enough. Like I'm interested enough in the game and everything that's happening and every play and every player and all the things that are going on. I don't need to be adding on to anything else with any kind of bet for Michigan against, and this is certainly against Michigan. I would do that, but I don't know how many people are like this, but I'll ask you. Is it something you would even consider thinking about? Well, you don't want to consider losing the game, but if they did, you score a big check, and in this case, a couple $1,000 by putting down $100. I wouldn't want to put $155 because then I would it get to a point where you'd be like, hey, maybe no. That's the thing. Where if you put enough money down, you start thinking about, I could use an extra $2,000. I wouldn't want to put myself into that situation ever. Let's read some of the feedback before we get to some ranking madness. Todd says MSU had some seasons in the late 80s, but they really got beat most times by U of M for 30 years growing up. D'Antonio brought him up a little bit. There's no doubt about that. You'd find him once in a while, and then that's it. Yeah, Notre Dame, way more important growing up. Lifetime head coaching record 24-21. That's a heap of suck for Tuck. Steven, sure, he may win more in the future, but that's not good. Yeah, well, if you're looking at his overall record, all right, talking about Tuck. I'm talking about his time at Michigan State and what he was able to do the first year against Michigan, what he was able to do last year against Michigan, and what he was able to do overall in the season that he had. Sure, you want to go back and go to Colorado. All right. U of M will get 100 yards on bubble screens to Ronnie, Roman, and CJ. Sounds like a band. The real Michigan fans believe if Michigan lost to State, we deserve it. D'Antonio popularized the hatred. Did D'Antonio popularize the hatred? I'll buy that he popularized the hatred. He used disrespect. The fans, Michigan State fans, it sounds pretty easy, but they all hated Michigan and Michigan's arrogance and the way Michigan looked down their nose at Michigan State, how they never gave them credit for anything, how they, even if they, would win a game, they'd say, you're our third rival. Everything when it came to Michigan and Michigan State, Michigan fans were just like, State is nothing. State is a pushover. And then when Hart said it's like stealing it from your little brother, Mark D'Antonio went over there and made fun of a student athlete in Mike Hart. He was over there talking about, you mean that little guy or something? He was holding his hands. Like, really? A coach is going to make fun of a player? Like, but the State fans, they just loved it. They just couldn't get enough. Yeah, let's make fun of people. Let's not, it's not the coach. Let's make fun of players as a coach. That was a cheap shot, I always thought. I always can recall, too, that D'Antonio, after Michigan lost to Appy State, D'Antonio was in his press conference, and he was like, I don't know if they told him in his ear. He was like, what's that? Could you repeat that? He was like, he was laughing. Oh, he laughed. He laughed at Michigan, and he used Mike Hart, made fun of him, calling him short. And then it was on. Then he really, that was pushing all of his chips, all of his hatred, all the disrespect into the middle. And it worked for him for far too long. Just so happened that Michigan's coaches, the two that they hired, didn't really work out. Antonio was in a great spot, and there it is. Todd doesn't want to play Notre Dame again. Cheaters. It does absolutely nothing for Big Ten teams. Notre Dame cheaters. I don't know. Which way are they cheating? I don't know why. Sure. I don't know exactly how they're cheating, but all right. Steven wants to see 100 in vertical routes or somebody like Low White. There wasn't any talent that Michigan could lose without a blunder or a bad game. Lorenzo White was a great back. Andres thinks JJ is going to have a big game. Here's Third Minded saying that Tuck is doing a good job in recruiting. Yeah, the same pipeline that got Tuck his $95 million, the Ishbia and the money bags. I'd say that affectionately. I don't know what else. Richie Rich, when it comes down to name, image, and likeness, Michigan State is not taking the same route of Michigan. Like, Michigan State's like, wait, you want money to come here? You want money up front? Okay. That's what they're saying. Like everybody else is. Michigan's not. Maybe a couple other ones are trying to do it a little the same way. Michigan's outwardly like, no, we're not going down that road. We're not playing that game. We'll pay you here. We're transforming. Like, they're still playing the transformative of her transactional card is still out there for Michigan. And Michigan State is like, no, man, you want the money? Come on, let's go. We got a lot of it. You want a car? You want cigars and scotch at I guess you can't offer scotch to a recruit. You want whatever. Probably they can't offer cigars either. You want money? Go green. You want cars? Go white. I mean, so that's the game they're playing. The name, image, and likeness game. I'm not mad. I think I understand what Michigan's doing, but I would rather see Michigan, play the name, image, and likeness game like everyone else is. Not like they're doing it, but hey, that's me. You talk to most Michigan fans, I think they agree with me too. I think that, maybe there's alums that are like, no, we just don't want to stoop to the level of everyone else. And, they've got a point there. And if it can make you feel good that, Michigan's kind of, taking a high road, this particular, when it comes to paying recruits, they're taking a high road. But, take the high road on everything or play an even playing field like everyone else. Not be selective on what you're playing with the high road. So, because Michigan's not high road with everything. But that's an argument. I spent all summer. Somebody told me I was talking with him recently last week, a friend of mine. And he was asking me about the podcast in the summer because right now it's every day. It's football. I got a game coming up. Talking about the last game, looking ahead. I mean, it's awesome. He said, well, what'd you talk about every day all summer? I said, name, image, and likeness. And that's what we did. Should Michigan pay? Should Michigan not? Are they doing the right thing? Are they doing transformational? Are the other teams? Are they going to get left behind? Are they sacrificing this class every day, all day? He was like, wow, that's a lot. Okay, let's run through some of these messages coming in, the feedback. I've got another topic here still for you. Jeffrey saying the last couple of years have been cute, but it's time for Michigan to make a statement in this rivalry and hang a 60 burger on these guys. Let's just keep that one up there. Keep that one up there, Jeffrey. Can I star that? There's got a little star on here. Let's put a little star. What happens? There it is. Jeffrey gets a star. I'm going to read it again. Jeffrey on the feedback says the last couple years have been cute, but it's time for Michigan to make a statement in this rivalry and hang a 60 burger on these guys. All right, I'm in on the 60 burger. As much as I talk about the voting and getting out for the Associated Press, and I don't like talking politics. It's not really my thing. I'm going to talk some politics here. Big Gretch, Gretchen Whitmer, has taken to Twitter, and she put out a tweet about this Saturday's game. And Big Gretch, excuse me, said, unfortunately, University of Michigan's undefeated streak will come to an end under the lights of the Big House this Saturday because Tuck coming. That's from Big Gretch. But you didn't know that Santa's in town. Santa Ono. And Santa's all about Twitter. And Santa fired back. With all due respect, Governor, I think not. A little go blue and that little Michigan icon with the longer M. There it is. Santa, that's a nice comeback from the new president of Michigan. I like it. Santa firing back at the governor. So that was good stuff. Okay, here's the other thing I wanted to get to. The college football expert Heather Dinich from ESPN. She's always covering the college football playoffs, and she's always on there with Paul Feinbaum. And we know ESPN has a slant towards the SEC. That's who they're going to say in bed with, which is true. That's who they are aligned with. And Heather and Feinbaum are right there with him, even though, and I don't think Paul, he's not trying to be like even across the board. I think everybody knows where he's coming from. I don't know if Dinich thinks of herself as, somebody that's playing it down the middle or not. But, that's either here or there. She put out a tweet yesterday about her top 4 in college football right now. She put Ohio State at 1, Georgia at 2, Tennessee at 3, and she put quack, Oregon at 4. A Michigan fan immediately got on there and said, what a joke, Bama and Michigan lower than Oregon. Now, I do a poll myself, and most of the times I put it on here for you to see. And let's go to Heather Dinich came back and said, you can certainly argue Bama, but I'm not sold on Michigan quite yet. I had them at 4 last week, but Ducks just earned a convincing win against a top 10 opponent. Yeah, and we all know what the problem with this particular tweet from Dinich is that Michigan just beat a top 10 opponent. And the biggest thing about that, like if the Ducks didn't have any losses, or they had a really close loss, could you make a case to put a 1-loss team in front of a unbeaten Michigan team? Probably not. But if you wanted to go to strength of schedule and all these things, and you wanted to be down on Michigan because of their non-conference and strength of schedule, you might want to do that. But let's examine the polls a little bit here. Here's how I put my top 10 this week. I would have voted Tennessee number 1, followed by Georgia. I've moved Michigan to 3, Ohio State at 4. I've got Clemson at 5, TCU. I've got Bama. Now, Bama has lost 1 game, and they lost to, in the polls, the number 3 team in my poll, number 1 Tennessee by 3 points. Oklahoma State I'll put at 8. Oklahoma State's got 1 loss, but they lost 1 game to TCU, who's a top 10 team. That's better than Oregon. USC has lost 1 game, and it was by 1 point to Utah, who's ranked 14 this week. And I would put Wake Forest at 10. Wake Forest has lost 1 game, and it was by 6 points to Clemson. Here's the problem with Oregon. Like, they looked good. I watched them against UCLA. They looked great. Going up against Chip Kelly and everything in Autzen and Eugene. They lost to Georgia by 46 freaking points. How can you be Heather Dinich? How can you be a college football? Like, that's your thing. Like, I'm big college football. I'm putting Oregon at 4 in front of Clemson, TCU, Bama, Oklahoma State, USC, Wake Forest. This is one of the dumber top 4s. I don't know. Again, I try not to. This is one of the most surprising top 4s that I've ever seen, but it's a good reminder. Like, we're all watching one thing and somebody else could be watching another. And for as much as, like, I try to do this, I do it with officials, and we're going to get to that tomorrow. Like, say, look, officials are really not trying to, they're not on the take, they're not all these different things that, fans will, like, we're getting screwed on purpose because of the refs. And I was like everybody complains about the refs. Sure, there'll be a rogue one every once in a while, but, and more on that tomorrow because they're not doing a very good job. But then everybody else, like, media is always, they're completely biased. They're always somebody, you're a total homer for this team or for this conference or for this network. Fans don't believe that anybody can just give an opinion that is, based on an observation on what they're seeing. Like, everybody's tainted and everybody's a homer. So you might as well just be a homer for the team that you like and just follow those cases. And everybody, and there's a lot of people that are like that. I think of most of the people that cover Michigan. And it does feel like, not all, but it feels like most are like complete homers for Michigan. Like, people like that. Like, they want them because I think everybody else is homers for the other team. But this doesn't do any good for college football and for Heather Dinich when she comes out and puts Oregon at number 4. Let's look at the ESPN has a strength of schedule. And the reason that I voted how I voted, I put Tennessee 1. They're undefeated. And they beat Alabama. I put Georgia at number 2. They have had some close shaves. They are the defending champs. They beat Oregon. I'm going to say 2 through really 5, maybe even 6. I wouldn't argue with anybody that wanted to move these teams around anywhere else, because you could say Georgia has had 2 close shaves, and they're not the team that they were last year. I'm looking with the eye test. They're really not the top 2 team. They're not as impressive as Michigan. They're not as impressive as Ohio State. They're not as impressive as Clemson. If you wanted to make a case for TCU, the thing about Alabama is they got a loss, so I don't know how you're making that case. Alabama fans make that case. Heather Dinich made that case for Alabama, and here's why Heather Dinich is doing it, because if you look at strength of schedule, Alabama's got a top 10 strength of schedule. And if you look at these other teams, Ohio State, Michigan, and Georgia, their strengths of schedule are all in the 80s. 80s. Now, Michigan's got a better strength of schedule than Georgia and Ohio State right now. Ohio State's a little bit unlucky because they scheduled Notre Dame, and the Irish happened to suck. That's why I moved Ohio State down. Who's Ohio State's best win? Is it Notre Dame? That's just on name. It's Iowa, and they rolled Iowa, but I don't know. They didn't look great doing it. That's why I moved Michigan in front of them. If somebody wanted to make the case that it's Tennessee, Clemson, I can understand that. Clemson's best win was probably against Wake, who's in the top 10. NC State, Q's, these are all top 25 teams. Clemson, you can make a case for being number 1. But as you notice here, you can't really make a case for Oregon. All of these other teams with 1 loss is Alabama lost to 3 by Tennessee. Oklahoma State lost by 3 to TCU. USC lost to 1 by Utah. Wake Forest lost 1 game to 6 points to Clemson. Oregon, again, they lost 46. So you think, what is Heather Dinich looking at? Well, what she's looking at is that strength of schedule for Oregon. Because they got blown out by Georgia, it did help their strength of schedule. But, if Oregon lost by a field goal to Georgia, and they had the 17th ranked strength of schedule, and she wanted to put Oregon as the top 1-loss team, you want to put them up there by, at 5 or 6 as a 1-loss team. I don't know. TCU fans wouldn't like that. Certainly Clemson wouldn't like that. Bama wouldn't like it to rank them over them, but, I could see it. But you just can't. You shouldn't put Oregon in the top 4. That's a bad job by Heather Dinich. She deserves the criticism that she's getting, if she's getting it. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. All right. That's where I'm at with it all. Let's get some of the last feedback in here. Matt says State's only hope is their receiving core. I'm predicting 2 interceptions. Mark says no billionaire likes to see 90 million wasted. That's real money to them. They expect results. Watch Billions. They expect success no matter what. Oh, are we talking about... I watch Billions. What's my man's name? Hack. No, it's not Hack. I like Billions. I can't remember. Scars. Scars, who joins us on Monday. Axe. That's his name. Scar. Axe. Close. Yeah, Axe. Axe isn't going for it. Axe is pounding the table, and he's throwing guys out. I'm more, what was his Axe's right-hand man who's a little eccentric? I like that dude in there. I gave up on Billions. I thought it was good writing and good dialogue, and then I was watching it, and I still liked it, and then it just fell for me. It happens sometimes. Did they get rid of Axe in that show? Jason thinks that Tux has only 2 more years max. Max. Todd talking about $95 million. All right, let me just read through some of these. Third Minded says, I'm pro-Michigan. I only want State to lose when they play us. I want us to crush them, but they can beat everyone else. I'm not a fanatic. I went to college in Georgia. Yeah, it doesn't work like that up here, Third Minded. Like, I used to think you could be like, yeah, you root for the state of Michigan every time until Michigan and Michigan State play one another, and then you pick your side. Most Michigan fans, they're not buying that. Your rival has to experience pain at your own hands, but then at the hands of everyone else as well. And if you follow along closely enough and you believe the following statement, everything in recruiting matters. A lot of people believe that. I think there's some truth to that. So you never want Michigan State to have any success at all because that means that they could potentially get a recruit from you. You always want them down. And then you've got a lot of loudmouth friends. I worked with the loudest mouth Spartan for 14 years in Detroit on radio. 14 years. How did I do it? I decided that whenever it came down to Michigan and Michigan State, I just would not listen. And you know what? It worked out really well. This guy's a pretty talented radio host, very successful, big Michigan State guy. And we never had any issues. We got along really well. And I just never listened to him when he talked because at first I did. And I was like, I'm going to kill this guy. I'm going to go in. I'm just going to slam his head into the wall. And then I said, okay, just don't do it. Nobody's forcing me to listen to somebody bash Michigan and prod and poke me about Michigan. So I just turned it off. And then the last time, so it's been a few years, 2015 was the last time I remember listening to the radio, this host. I had done a really good job. It worked. I'm like, hey, this is working really well. But then my wife was going in to get a spray tan, and she left me in the parking lot. It was 2:00. I was like, ooh, 2:00. And it was the game after Michigan, the first one to Michigan State that Harbaugh lost with a punt at the end. Like, the biggest disaster in the world. And then I'm like, it just happened to be a couple minutes past 2:00. And I'm like, all right, he's on the radio. Don't turn it on. That would be the stupidest thing that you would ever want to do. Like you've done so well for the last couple of years. Hadn't listened. Everything's worked out well. You get, good relationship, worked out fine. So I said, yeah, I'm sitting in the parking lot without. So I turned it on. First thing I heard, and all you Michigan fans can burn in hell. And I was like, all right, turned it back. That took about 3 seconds. And I was like, okay, that was there's no reason. Stick it up you, something very close to that. And I'm like, all right, there's a really good reason that I won a couple of years, and that's it. State fans at my workplace are disgraceful. They root for OSU over U of M. Strange cats. No. I think a lot of Michigan fans do the same thing. You never want. It's tough when Ohio State plays Michigan State because you're going to be happy either way because one of your rivals is going to be sad. And even though there's a lot of people that did this in the tournament, and I get it. It looks good for the Big Ten, and you say, oh, you root for the Big Ten teams. It'll really help. It was like just this year, Ohio State was playing Notre Dame, and you go into that one, and you're like, well, who do you want to win, or what's best for the Big Ten? Well, best for the Big Ten would have been Ohio State to beat Notre Dame, and help out your ranking, help out your strength of schedule, help out everything, make you look better if you beat them. But I already knew. I've been down that road a million times, just sitting around rooting for Ohio State. Want Michigan State to win their bowl game? No. You just don't want it to happen. Todd's thinking 14 points, Sounds just about right. Half the country doesn't even know that there are two teams in Michigan. Would I pay 155 to guarantee a win? Well, when you're playing these, yes, I would. I would. My wife might not like me, forking over the 155, but once I told her, hey, this is a guaranteed win, that's all it's going to take for me to, get Michigan in the winner's circle, I think she would give me the 155. Yeah, I'll play that game. State gave 95 million for a win. There you go, Mark. You were setting me up for that joke. Set me up for the joke, and it worked. I took a hook, line, and sinker, and it was a good one, and it worked really well. Remember the Penn State spread over and under? Everyone was liked what Vegas was thinking, and then Michigan smashes Penn State. D. Brown likes Michigan to cover. People talking more about gambling, and the way it goes through there. Dinich is looking for views. That's right. She is. You get into some politics, you expect one of these or two. Big Gretch is going to lose, just like she's going to lose her governorship. Hey, like I said, normally I don't really like, politics, but hey, I'm the one that brought it. I'm the one that brought it in here. So no, sorry, Big Gretch. Pack your bags. I don't know if this is true. Big Gretch's daughter goes to Michigan. She should be rooting for Michigan. Are there more Michigan fans in the state of Michigan anyways? Wouldn't that be better for her if Big Gretch came out and said, hey, I don't know if you could do this. I want all Michigan. Whoever wins the game, I want their fan base to vote for me. Wouldn't you want Michigan to win? I don't know how that works. I don't think you can just do that. You got to play both sides. You're a politician. Somebody correcting me. They played Georgia, not Bama. Did I say? Sometimes I'll say the wrong thing. You know what I was talking about. Benjamin correcting me too. That's what I meant. I don't remember saying it, but I'm with you. You're right. I'm trying to listen while I type. Oh, they're talking to somebody else. I thought maybe it was me that screwed up. All right. Richard says radio is a dead medium. It's interesting, Richard. I think that AM, I'll agree with you that you got to do a lot more things just beyond AM radio, but I'm still a radio fan. But the one thing about radio, it's weird. It reminds me of just creatures of habit, being lazy. It comes down to watching Amazon. I've got a TV upstairs. I can sit down on Thursday night when the game's on, and it really takes me about 10 seconds. Push the button. It fires up Amazon and I watch the game. So about 10 seconds. And then I can flip to watch, the baseball game at the same time of the football game, but it takes an extra 10, 15 seconds when I have the remote. That's not ideal. It's, 15 seconds is not all that big of a deal. And yet you'd think, I end up staying on the football game a lot longer. And then I have a downstairs TV. This is going to make me sound lazy. That I'm about 10 feet away. I've got a chair and my remote. I've got to actually go up to the TV onto the side, and I have to push a button to get me to a different screen that fires up Amazon. And in total, it takes about 60 seconds. The Fire Stick, I think it's called. It gets it going, and I never get up when that is on and change it back, to cable from that. And it takes 60 seconds, and then I actually have to get up. This is the point. Sometimes I sit down and I'll turn the TV on. I'm like, oh, it's on all of the apps, not on regular TV. And then you know what'll happen if there's not something done? I might not get up. It's the same thing in the radio. You think it's in your car. It's not really that hard. This particular show downloads after I'm done here. And in about an hour, You can just go, most of all of you right here, even if you don't know how to do it, it would probably take you about 15 seconds to punch up either the podcast or the YouTube and just push play, and you could listen to it through your speakers in the car. It would be just like radio without all the commercials for over an hour, just Michigan talk. Sounds pretty good. And yet the radio, you just turn it on and there it is. 15 seconds. Can they make it? They need to get it down to like 2 seconds on there. I don't know. Maybe that's me doing a lot of complaining. Todd saying he agrees. All right. Last text of the day, and let's see where we're going with it. It is from Apple TV is a lot quicker. Ooh, Richard. Oh, to flip it over and everything? I see what you're saying. Most Michigan haters on MSU post Antonio. Third Minded says, I always root for State over Ohio State. I hate Ohio more than my own state. I hear you. Let's see. People knew exactly who I was talking about. All right. Coming up tomorrow, we'll look at some numbers. Some people like, I like the matchups and talk about the teams, fun things. I've got some things on some referees, and I'm going to put some numbers up, and then I'll have a third thing that yet to be determined. Thanks, everybody, for participating, watching the show. And until tomorrow, everybody have a great day. If I did not tell you, I'm going to tell you right now that we've got podcasts all week long, an Amazing Blue Review. I'd also like you to join up and get involved and see some of you guys on the posting board. You can get in there, and it's a all day, all night type of thing. You can subscribe to the Amazing Blue Review. Go to MichiganRivals.com. You got the podcast all available. It's great if you push the thumbs up on, if you're watching YouTube right now, you subscribe, you comment, all those things. I read the comments. When you comment, I'll come back and thank you for the comment on the air. That's how it's done. I'm in the mood for the Halloween week. This is actually a squash, but I thought that it's the first time I've ever carved a squash, and it was pretty quick and it worked pretty well. So, although I'll admit it is green, so maybe I'll smash it on Saturday at around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on the air here. All right, till tomorrow. Everybody have a great day. Thanks for listening. See you then.